Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
The Columbia River Gorge is the kind of place that can swallow a woman whole without ever making a sound, and I learned that the hard way the evening the wind carried a stranger's cry down Dog Mountain. I'd hiked the gorge my entire life, always chasing solitude, but that day the quiet felt wrong, too heavy, like it was waiting for me to step into something I couldn't step back out of. My cousin Ryan was somewhere upslope hunting a wounded elk, and I'd split off from him to check a lower ridge. I wasn't supposed to go far. I kept telling myself that. Just a quick circuit, then head back before the sun hit the ridgeline. But the light was fading faster than it should have, and the chill in the air felt bone deep. The river roared so far below it sounded like a long, steady inhalation. Pine needles whispered under my boots, and the whole forest felt like it was leaning in to listen to every step I took. Then, slicing through the wind so sharply it made me stop mid-step, came a voice. "Help! Somebody! Please!" Everything inside me went still. The cry was desperate, but there was something off about it, something rehearsed. I scanned the trees, heart thudding, feeling the way the gorge's silence pooled around the sound like it was absorbing it instead of echoing it. Still, instinct dragged me toward it. You don't ignore someone screaming for help, not out here. I pushed through cedar branches until I saw him. A man slumped beside a fallen log, one hand clutching his ribs, a thick smear of blood painting his flannel shirt. At first glance it was horrific, but as I stepped closer, I realized I didn't smell anything. Real blood has a metallic bite, a sharpness that grabs your throat. This smelled like nothing. His breaths were strange too, perfectly spaced, like a metronome set to mimic distress. And when his eyes rose to meet mine, his expression flicked so fast from agony to calculation that my skin crawled. "You're a hiker, right?" he asked, voice trembling just enough to feel planned. "Strong woman like you could help get me to my camp." The way he said woman made my stomach clench. And the way his eyes darted, not at me, not at the fake injury, but at the trees behind me. Like he was checking if someone else could see me yet. I swallowed hard. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The wind shifted, and the blood smear on his shirt glistened in the fading light. Too bright, too glossy. Then he slipped, just for a second. His thumb brushed the smear, smudging it like cheap stage makeup. His injured leg straightened a little too easily. When he noticed me staring, his expression darkened like a curtain dropping. "Yeah." His voice lowered, losing the whimper entirely. "You'll do." A cold bolt of adrenaline shot through me. "Where's the bear that did this?" I asked, voice shaking. His smile stretched, mean, hungry, performed. "There's no bear, Megan." My name hit me harder than the cold wind. I hadn't told him. I hadn't said a word about who I was. Every instinct inside me screamed. I backed up a step, but he surged forward. I didn't think. I just acted. My bear spray, clipped to my pack strap, was in my hand before I fully registered moving. I fired straight into his eyes. He shrieked, stumbling back, hands clawing at his face, his voice suddenly vicious and unmasked. And then the forest exploded. Branches cracked behind me. Someone else charging through the brush, heavy steps. Fast. Another man. Too late to grab me, but close enough that I felt the displacement of air behind my shoulders as I sprinted downslope. The gorge blurred around me. Pine, rock, shadow, wind. My lungs burned, my legs screaming, but the terror behind me pushed harder. I heard them shouting, angry, panicked. No trace of pain left in their voices. They weren't injured. They weren't stranded. They were hunting. They were hunting me. By the time I stumbled onto the main trail, the last shards of daylight were slipping behind the ridge. The roar of the river felt deafening now, like it was warning me. I ran until I tasted blood in the back of my throat and my vision swam. And then, just when the world started tilting, Ryan burst out of the trees, bow in hand. Eyebrows knotted in confusion and alarm. "Megan, Jesus, what happened?" What came out of me wasn't a sentence, just fragments. "Man, fake injury. Another guy." They knew my name, Ryan. They said my name. His face drained of color. "We need to move, now." But when I glanced over my shoulder, the trail behind us was empty, silent, like nothing had ever been there at all. I didn't stop shaking until we reached the switchback where Ryan had found another hunter unconscious, an older man lying face down beside the trail, pockets turned inside out. He said a guy begged him for help, Ryan muttered. Same story. The hunter's bow was gone, his trail cam too. Whatever these men wanted, gear, bodies, the thrill of control, I didn't want to understand it any more than I already did. We left the man with Ryan's emergency blanket and sprinted toward the trailhead. Every time the wind hissed through the pines, I flinched. Every shadow felt like a body waiting. Every crack of a distant branch made my heart leap painfully against my ribs. The gorge was dark now, deep, swallowing dark, and I had the sickening sense that the forest was holding its breath, waiting to see where we'd go. When we reached the parking lot, my truck and Ryan's SUV were the only vehicles left. Simple fact. Should have felt normal, but I froze when I saw them. They looked off, not damaged, not opened, just watched, like the forest had eyes and was sizing us up from the tree line. Ryan noticed my hesitation. "They're gone," he said quietly. I nodded, but my muscles refused to unclench. Even when we got inside his SUV and locked the doors, my eyes kept darting to the mirrors, expecting movement. A figure, the man's face, something. We drove straight to the sheriff's office. The deputies didn't dismiss us. They'd dealt with enough wilderness crimes to know when someone wasn't exaggerating, but there was a practiced calm to them that didn't feel comforting. They asked questions, took notes, sent officers out, told us we'd likely run into thieves or drug runners using the trails. But the way the man had said my name kept ricocheting inside my skull. The next morning, the sheriff called. They'd arrested 2 men from Vancouver, one hiding in a ravine, one near the road, both with gear stolen from hikers, both with bear spray burns on their arms and eyes, both armed. Predators using fake injuries to lure people close enough to overpower. It should have been closure, but instead of relief, I felt something worse. A cold clarity, because even if those 2 were caught, someone else had been there. I'd heard the second one, felt him behind me, and neither of the arrested men matched the height or the voice of the one who'd chased me. When I asked the sheriff if they found a third man, he paused too long before saying no. For weeks after, I jumped at every knock on my door, even broad daylight ones from delivery drivers. I stopped hiking, stopped going near the river, stopped sleeping through the night. Whenever wind threaded through the trees outside my window, I'd snap awake, heart in my throat, hearing echoes of that practiced cry. "Help! Somebody! Please!" My therapist told me memory can fuse fear with imagination, that the mind replays danger in exaggerated ways to protect us. That maybe he'd said something like, "Hey, miss," and my adrenaline turned it into my name, that I wasn't actually being hunted. But none of that explains what I heard the night I finally tried to return to the gorge. It was early fall, golden leaves drifting across the trailhead parking lot as I stood there, palms sweaty, pack unused in my grip. I hadn't even stepped out of my truck yet when a breeze swept up from the river, cold, sharp, and carried with it a thin, wavering sound. A moan, not loud, not pleading, a practicing moan, like someone rehearsing a wounded cry, sharpening it, tuning it. I froze, breath locked in my chest. The sound faded instantly, swallowed by the gorge's impossible silence, but the message was clear, cold, and familiar. It was waiting for someone to answer, and it didn't matter that the men were arrested. It didn't matter that I'd escaped. It didn't matter that logic said I was safe, because the Columbia River Gorge doesn't forget the people it almost claims. And some nights, when the wind shifts just right, I can still hear that voice, soft, patient, deliberate, warming itself up for its next audience. I was 34 the October morning. Malheur National Forest reminded me that you can walk into a place 1,000 times and still not be prepared for what waits the 1,001st. The air was brittle with cold, the kind that makes every inhale feel like you're swallowing glass. Fog clung to the valley like something territorial. I'd driven out with my friends Brad and Kevin to track a wounded bear after the 3 of us had spent the weekend glassing ridges near Murderer's Creek. They moved ahead together, and I stayed a little behind, the way I always did, listening more than talking, watching more than stepping. I liked the forest quiet. Or I used to. By the time we fanned out along the ridge, the fog had thickened to a wall. Brad joked somewhere ahead, "Dana, don't vanish on us," and I yelled back something about him worrying too much. It felt normal then, just another morning in the woods, but something in the fog felt off, heavier than the weather app had predicted. Even the birds seemed reluctant to speak above a whisper. I kept moving, tracking the faint drag marks of the bear's wounded gait, though half the time I felt like I was following shadows. The basalt cliffs boxed the valley on both sides, creating this strange echo chamber where even my own footsteps sounded like they belonged to someone else. I remember thinking the quiet wasn't natural. It felt intentional, as if the forest were holding its breath. Then gunfire, short, controlled bursts, cut through the silence. I froze. Those weren't hunting rifle shots. They were too tight, too clean. Automatic fire doesn't echo the same way out here. It sounds like someone tearing cloth right beside your ear. My first instinct was that Brad and Kevin were messing around, firing warning shots at coyotes or something stupid, but the sound didn't match their rifles, and both of them knew better. I whispered, "Brad? Kevin?" But the fog swallowed the words. The shots came again, closer this time, sharp enough that I felt a vibration in my ribs. Every trail back to them funneled straight toward the noise, and with the canyon narrowing behind me, I realized I had only two choices: go toward the gunfire or turn around and hike a 3-hour detour over loose shale in near zero visibility. I chose forward, not out of bravery, but because my brain had already turned the quiet behind me into something watching. The smell hit before the shapes did, a thick, acrid blend of fertilizer, diesel, and something sweet that didn't belong this deep in the forest. I knew that smell in theory. Everyone in Oregon does. Illegal grow ops aren't exactly secrets anymore, but smelling one up close is different. It's a warning, a smell that says someone has claimed the land and doesn't want visitors. The fog thinned just enough for me to see movement ahead. Tarps, low makeshift roofs, irrigation lines stretched like veins across the dirt. My stomach dropped. A full grow operation, and not some scrappy setup either. This looked organized, efficient, professional. Then I saw them. 6, maybe 7 men, rifles slung in ways that said they weren't for animals. One held an AR with the familiarity of someone who'd slept beside it. They were speaking Spanish, fast, clipped, all business. I only caught pieces. Camino, aire, mujer, woman. I didn't even have time to step back. Alto! A voice snapped behind me. I spun to find a rifle muzzle already pressed behind my left ear. My whole body went cold. I raised my hands instantly. The man behind me barked something to the others. They closed in. One of them was young, maybe 19, with a hand trembling so badly that he kept adjusting his grip. Another was older, heavy-set, with a calm, almost bored expression that scared me more than the gun. "Who are you?" he asked in accented English. I'm just hiking," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "My friends are up the ridge." Wrong. His eyes darkened at the mention of friends. One man cursed under his breath. Another said, "She saw everything." I didn't understand the rest, but the tone. I didn't need translation. The older man stared at me like he was calculating the weight of my body versus the weight of whatever problem I'd created. Then, calm as breathing, he asked, "You alone?" My mouth opened, but before I could answer, a radio somewhere behind them crackled violently, static, then a frantic burst of words. They all turned. That second was all I needed. I bolted into the brush, heart slamming against my ribs so hard it felt like it might crack them. Shouts behind me exploded into chaos. "Disparenle!" Bullets snapped through fir branches above my head, shearing bark like tiny explosions. One whistled past my cheek so close it split the air beside me. But after a few shots, the gunfire stopped. Which was worse. Because then the forest went silent again, heavy, waiting. And I realized the men had switched tactics. They weren't shooting anymore. They were hunting. I dropped to my hands and knees and crawled into a thicket so dense it clawed at my jacket. The branches snagged my hair, scraped my scalp, and shoved pine needles down my collar. I didn't care. Hiding mattered more than breathing. I pulled myself deeper until my elbows were pinned against cold earth and my cheek pressed into damp moss. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, patient. Someone clicked their tongue twice. It wasn't a signal I recognized. It felt more like someone enjoying themselves. Boots crushed twigs just inches from me. I could hear breathing, steady, controlled. They weren't scared. They weren't rushing. They knew I was somewhere close, and they were taking their time. Once, a hand brushed a branch directly above my face, making a shower of needles fall onto my neck. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. The urge to jerk away was overwhelming, but I stayed still. I became the forest floor, cold, silent, dead. Minutes stretched into hours. My muscles cramped so badly I had to focus on not passing out. My mind kept replaying the moment the gun pressed behind my ear, the metal, the finality of it. I wondered how many people had stood where I stood now, on the edge of choosing between movement and survival. At some point late in the afternoon, the footsteps drifted away. The air changed, the tension loosening just enough that I could breathe without my chest rattling. But I didn't leave. I didn't trust it. I stayed until dusk bled the sky into black. Only when everything was wrapped in night did I crawl out, shaking uncontrollably. My body felt foreign, as if fear had rearranged my bones. I walked downhill for nearly an hour before I heard human voices. Familiar ones. "Dana?" Kevin shouted. "Dana! Jesus, where were you?" I stumbled into them, half frozen, covered in dirt and pine needles. Brad grabbed my shoulders. "We heard the gunfire. We looked for you. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," I lied. I didn't tell them everything. Not then. I couldn't form the words. We reported what I had seen the next morning to federal authorities in John Day. The agents listened with professional expressions that didn't quite hide the fact that this wasn't news to them. One of them, a tired-looking man with gray at his temples, said quietly, "These grows have been moving deeper for years. They're dangerous. You were lucky." Lucky. The word felt wrong, as if luck had anything to do with what happened. I went home that night trying to convince myself I was safe. But the forest didn't leave me. Every sound outside my house made me jump. I double-checked locks twice an hour. The smell of fertilizer on someone's boots at a gas station made my stomach twist. I started dreaming in fog, white, thick, alive. 2 weeks later, I walked out to my driveway on a cold morning, coffee steaming in my hand. Frost coated my windshield in feathered patterns, and then I saw it, a strip of camouflage tarp caught neatly under my driver's side wiper blade. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. It wasn't a note, not a threat, not anything overt, just a small torn fragment of tarp, the exact same kind stretched over those grow structures in the fog. Someone had stood close enough to touch my windshield. Close enough to watch me, close enough to let me know that whatever I thought I'd escaped was still out there, moving quietly, wearing boots that don't break twigs unless they choose to. I looked around the neighborhood, at the empty street, at the tree line beyond the houses. Everything looked normal, but I knew better, because somewhere out in Malheur, maybe 10 miles away, maybe 100, men who never wanted to be found were still walking among the trees, patient as the fog itself. And they remembered me. I don't go hiking alone anymore. But sometimes at night, when the house settles or the wind shifts through the pines across the road, I hear something faint, something like a single twig snapping under a careful boot. And I lie there in the dark, eyes open, knowing the forest may not be done with me yet.
I was 32 when the forest finally showed me a part of itself I wish I could forget. That sentence has lived in my head like a splinter ever since that weekend in Deschutes, because it was the first moment I understood that some places don't just hold memories. They wait for them. They wait for you. Chris and I had driven up from La Pine with this brittle hope that a quiet winter camping trip might patch what had been slowly cracking between us. The colder it got outside, the easier it was to pretend the frost inside our house wasn't spreading too. Still, I tried. We both did, I think. By the time we turned off the Forest Service road, the weak afternoon light was sliding between the pines like it was afraid to touch the ground. And the air carried that metallic smell winter gets when snow is somewhere nearby, watching you. I remember Chris saying, "We beat the crowds," and trying to give me this lopsided smile that never reached his eyes. But the clearing was already occupied. Or it should have been. The fire was still burning, crackling in these sharp little pops. A cast iron pan sat over the coals, warming something that smelled faintly like beans. 2 camp chairs faced the flames. A thermos lay on its side as if someone had just set it down, carelessly. And yet, the mud around the site was pristine, smooth, except for our boot prints, like the earth itself had pressed flat any trace of the people who'd been there moments before. I felt a pressure in my chest. The way you feel when you walk into a room where someone has just been arguing. Nothing visible, but something lingering in the air. "Chris," I whispered, though I didn't know what I meant for him to do. He walked the perimeter, boots crunching softly. "Maybe they went for a hike," he said, but the statement wobbled like a lie. You don't leave a burning fire unattended. You don't leave your food steaming. You don't leave without tracks. We should have left then. That's the part I replay most. We should have just gotten back in the Subaru and driven until the forest changed its mind about us. But Chris said, "Let's set up our tent a little ways off. If they come back, we'll just say sorry." He kept his voice calm, but I saw the way his hands trembled when he tightened a strap on his pack. Maybe we were both trying too hard to seem normal. The light died fast, swallowed by the trees, and the air tasted sharper, colder. We made dinner on our little stove, but everything I ate felt metallic on my tongue. Every few minutes, I found myself looking back toward that abandoned campsite, half expecting the owners to stroll in laughing, but no one came. By the time we zipped ourselves into the tent, the forest was so still it felt staged, manufactured, a silence waiting for something to disturb it. I drifted in and out until I heard the first soft crunch of a footstep outside, then another. Deliberate, slow, like someone circling, careful not to brush against the nylon. Chris whispered, "Emily, don't move." His breath smelled of cold air and fear. We lay frozen as the steps made their loop, again and again. Always the same pace, the same distance, as if whoever, or whatever it was, could walk that circle blindfolded. Around the fourth or fifth pass, something inside me shifted. It was like my body finally understood what my mind refused to accept. We were being studied. Not approached, not stalked, studied, and the footsteps never faltered, never sped up, never dragged. Human, but too patient. Too measured. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. I lost track of how many times they circled us. My breath grew shallow, like the cold air was thickening around me. At one point, the steps paused directly behind my head, inches away. I felt warmth gathering in my eyes, tears threatening to spill, but I clenched them shut until stars danced behind my lids. When the steps finally moved again, part of me wished they hadn't. Dawn came like a gasp. Pale light pushed through the tent wall, and Chris unzipped the flap so fast the zipper screeched. We scrambled out, boots slipping. The mud around our tent was a map of chaos, bare footprints everywhere. Overlapping, circling, weaving in patterns that didn't make sense. Some looked fresh enough that water still pooled in the impressions. Others were small, narrow, almost delicate. A few were huge, the toes splayed unnaturally wide, and every single one was bare. The trail of prints led us back to the abandoned camp, and what we found there made my stomach contract violently. Everything had been moved. Not stolen, arranged. Clothes folded with precise corners. Cans stacked into pyramids. A stuffed bear placed perfectly centered on the sleeping bag. Its button eyes staring straight up like it had been instructed to look only at the sky. I remember Chris whispering, "This is messed up." And for once, I didn't correct him. When we reached the ranger station that afternoon, the lead ranger didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He asked us quietly, "Did you hear voices in the brush?" And when we said no, only footsteps, he nodded, like that was somehow worse. They hiked out to the site later that day. When they returned, the youngest ranger looked gray, like the cold had drained his color. He said the camp was still there, but torn apart, shredded, like someone had spent their whole night breaking it down piece by silent piece. Even he wouldn't describe the footprints, except to say there were a lot more of them. We drove home in near silence. Twice, Chris pulled over because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. At home, we barely spoke for days. The forest smell clung to my clothes, my hair. I caught myself listening to the house at night, waiting for something to move. And when the wind hit the siding, it sounded too much like quiet feet, shifting outside a thin wall. The first week after we returned, I tried to convince myself that I was fine. I went to work. I folded laundry. I cooked, but my senses had changed. Everything felt louder, sharper. The refrigerator's hum felt like it pressed against my skin. The ticking of our thermostat sounded like footsteps far away. And every time I stepped outside, I found myself scanning the edges of the tree line automatically, as if expecting to see a figure standing barefoot in the frost. Chris tried to pretend nothing had happened, but I could feel his unease under every sentence. He'd flinch when our dog barked. He'd wake up soaked in sweat. One night, when I turned over in bed, I caught him staring at the window with this rigid, haunted expression, like he was listening for a pattern only he could hear. "It won't happen again," he whispered to no one. I didn't have the courage to ask what "it" was. The next morning, I found our patio chairs moved, both angled toward the woods, perfectly symmetrical. I called for Chris, but he insisted he hadn't touched them. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. We dragged them back under the porch and locked the door. 2 days later, they moved again. By the second week, sleep felt like a risk. Whenever I closed my eyes, I heard the crunch of careful steps on cold earth, circling me, measuring me. I'd wake, gasping, clutching the blanket like something was trying to pull it from me. Chris suggested therapy, gently, but even the word made my jaw tighten. How could I explain fear that didn't belong to a person or a creature, but to something between something that walked like it remembered being human but had forgotten why? One night, as I washed dishes, I heard it, a soft, deliberate step outside on our deck. Not heavy, not sneaking, just present. I froze, my hands submerged in warm water that suddenly felt too thin. The step came again, closer this time, and the porch boards creaked softly. Chris burst into the kitchen at the same moment, his face white. "Did you hear it?" he whispered. Something shifted just outside the window, brushing the siding. I swallowed a scream. The motion sensor light flickered on, then off like it was being shadowed. When it came on again, the deck was empty, but the dirt at the base of the porch had a new footprint, bare, deep, facing directly toward our kitchen window. We argued for hours after that, whether to leave, whether to call someone, whether to admit this was no longer a thing we could wish away. In the end, exhaustion won, and we went to bed without deciding anything. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a soft, rhythmic sound. For a second, I thought it was rain. Then I realized it was too steady, too measured. Footsteps, circling the house. Chris jolted awake beside me, eyes wide, breath shallow. We lay there, both of us frozen, listening as the steps made a slow loop around our bedroom wall. Then the kitchen, then the porch, always careful, always rhythmic. The sound of someone who knew exactly how much noise to make, not too much, not too little. Just enough. After nearly an hour, the steps stopped beneath our bedroom window. Not moving, not leaving, just waiting. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like whoever stood there wanted me to get up, to look, to acknowledge them. My fingers twitched toward the curtain without my permission, but before I could move it, Chris grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he whispered, voice trembling. "Just don't." We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, we found more footprints. Not messy or chaotic, but arranged in a looping pattern in our garden, like someone was tracing shapes they alone understood. When I stepped closer, I realized the pattern circles inside circles, tightening toward the center like a slow funnel. The innermost footprint was deeper than the rest, like something had stood there for a long, long time. Chris and I barely speak now. Not out of anger, out of fear that words might draw something closer. The forest behind our house feels different, as if the trees lean in slightly when I step outside, as if they're listening. Some nights, when lapine quiets down and even the highway noise fades, I hear it again. Soft, patient, familiar. The slow, steady cadence of bare feet moving in circles. Always circling, always waiting. Waiting for me to remember the night they followed us home. And worse, waiting for the right night to stop circling. I was 29 the October. Matt and I found the truck idling in the middle of that remote, spur road near the Rogue River, and even now, I can feel the exact way the air tightened in my throat the moment I saw the driver's door hanging open. There's a kind of silence in deep Oregon woods that doesn't feel natural. It feels watchful, like the trees are listening for something you haven't yet realized, you said. That day, the sky sagged low and purple, heavy with rain waiting for permission to fall. The dirt road shimmered with thin threads of water, and that truck Silver, still running, felt like it had been left there not by accident, but deliberately, as if someone had stepped away mid-breath. Matt slowed our ATV, frowning. That doesn't look right. It didn't look right at all. The engine hummed with a steady, unbothered vibration, but the radio pushed out a broken hiss. Static warped, like someone had dragged their nails across the sound. A jacket lay half crumpled near the rear tire, soaking through at the edges. What got me wasn't the door being open. It was how fresh everything felt, as if someone had just stepped out and meant to return. As if we'd interrupted something in progress. "Hello?" Matt called, leaning toward the driver's side. I didn't want him to move closer. I didn't know why, but something inside me went rigid, my pulse giving a sharp, animal thud. "Matt, wait. Please." He glanced back at me. "It's fine, Sarah. Maybe someone got hurt, or stepped into the brush. We should make sure." But my eyes had already found it, the streak of red inside the door. Blood. Fresh, bright, smudged downward in lines like someone had slipped or been yanked. "Oh God," I breathed. Matt saw it too and stiffened. "Jesus. Okay, that's not good." He scanned the dirt around the truck, and that's when he froze completely. "Sarah, what the hell is that?" The ground was chewed up with impressions, long, dragging arcs, dips in the mud that looked almost like footprints, but stretched, elongated. Humanish at first glance, but warped at the toes, each ending in deep curved gouges like something had pushed off with hooked talons. I felt my throat close. Those aren't tracks, not real ones. Matt knelt, touching the edge of one. They're too wide for cats, too long for a bear, and not human. Not anything. The scratches on the truck's back panel came next, parallel grooves, evenly spaced, like claw marks made by something precise, intentional. Some angled toward each other like half-formed symbols, strokes that might have meant something if the maker had known how to shape them fully. I couldn't shake the thought that something had tried to write, with strength, it couldn't control. We followed the blood trail a little way because humans do stupid, hopeful things when faced with something that terrifies them. A torn branch here, a smear on bark there, and then nothing. No body, no collapse in footprints, no dragged path. Just the forest closing in, like a mouth. "Let's call it in," Matt said, voice tight. We used the satellite messenger and marked the truck's coordinates. The sensible thing would have been to head home, but dusk was closing fast, and the nearest paved road was miles away. Camping wasn't plan A. It was simply the only option, unless we wanted to drive blind in dark, unstable terrain. By twilight, the trees were swollen shadows, the air thin and metallic. Neither of us talked much while setting up the tent. My mind kept replaying those tracks. The way they curved at the end, the perfect spacing of the truck's scratches, the empty quiet that followed us all the way to camp. "Sarah," Matt said softly while we heated a can of chili over the stove. "We did what we could. Search and rescue will be here tomorrow." I nodded, but my nerves didn't care about logic. I kept glancing into the tree line, half expecting something tall and wrong-shaped to step out. The forest felt tighter somehow, like the dark had thickened into something that could touch us. We crawled into the tent by 10 p.m., the cold sinking through the nylon. Rain started sometime after midnight, tapping hard and uneven against the fly. I woke to that sound. Or maybe I woke because something had shifted in the dark. A scream tore through the woods. A human scream. High, raw, drenched in terror so real it carved straight into my marrow. Matt jerked upright. "That's a man," he whispered, voice cracking. Before I could answer, a second scream followed lower, strangled, like air being forced through lungs that didn't belong to a person. The woods held their breath. And then, The footsteps came. Slow. Heavy. Wet. Deliberate. Circling our camp. And stopping just outside the edge of our light. Matt and I froze, barely breathing. I could hear each footfall, deep, sodden impacts that made the ground give a little under their weight. The thing moved in uneven strides, like one leg carried more mass than the other, or bent at a wrong angle. Branches brushed, but too high. Too high for any human. Too high for deer or elk. Every time Matt clicked the flashlight on, the noises slipped just beyond the reach of the beam, as if the dark itself cooperated with whatever was out there. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. I couldn't form words. My mouth tasted like copper. My heartbeat felt slow and thick, like my blood had turned syrupy with fear. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to not even breathe too loudly. The creature circled once, then twice, each rotation tightening, like it was studying us. At one point, it paused directly behind the tent. I could feel its presence, the way the air subtly bowed inward, the faint heat of breath or steam brushing the canvas. Something dragged lightly across the fabric. Not claws, not fingers. Something rigid and curved, like the edge of a bone. I slapped my hand over my mouth to smother a sound I didn't even hear myself making. After nearly an hour that felt like years, the woods abruptly stilled, not quiet, vacant, as though the forest had been wiped clean of life. Not even the rain pattered. It misted instead, barely audible. "Sarah," Matt whispered eventually, "I think it's gone." But he didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. We stayed awake until the first thin streaks of light seeped through the tent walls. Only then did we gather our things with shaky hands and bolt back toward the main logging road. Matt kept the satellite messenger in his fist like a talisman. I kept my eyes fixed on the forest, searching for movement in the shadows. We didn't speak until we reached the gravel junction. Matt finally exhaled. "We need to tell the sheriff everything, and I know." I nodded, but even talking about it made my breath hitch. It felt like naming it out loud would give it more shape, more access. Officers later found the truck exactly where we'd left it, out of fuel. The blood was cataloged, the scratches photographed, but no tracks. No signs of a struggle, no path leading away. The missing hunter was identified as Michael Chen, 34, Medford local, experienced outdoorsman. He'd taken the truck out early that morning to scout before rifle season. His family put up flyers. Volunteers swept the Rogue River wilderness for days that stretched into weeks. No body. No clothing. No equipment. Nothing. One deputy told us, "It's like he walked into the trees and the forest ate him." He laughed when he said it, but his eyes didn't. We returned home to Grants Pass, but something had come back with me. A pressure, a listening. At night, when the rain hit the roof, I'd hear it again, that pacing, slow, measured strides just beyond the tree line behind our home. Too heavy for a person, too deliberate for an animal. The forest behind our backyard isn't deep, just a dense band of pines that leads to a fire road. But when the steps came, they didn't follow that path. They moved crosswise, indifferent to terrain, as though mapping circles around the house. Once, I stepped onto the porch at dusk and saw a shape standing between two trunks, tall, unmoving, watching. When I blinked, it melted backward into the trees, not turning, just sliding into the dark as if its body had no interest in the mechanics of walking away. I didn't tell Matt, not because I didn't trust him, but because saying it aloud felt like dragging it closer. 4 months have passed since that night in the woods. Michael Chen is still missing. The flyers are fading now, curling at the edges like old leaves. Search and rescue has called it cold. The forest keeps its secrets, with the kind of patience only ancient things possess. But the pacing hasn't stopped. Last week, just after 3 a.m., I heard it again, those slow, heavy footsteps circling outside the back of our house. I lay there, frozen, listening to each one land with unhurried certainty. When the movement paused directly behind our bedroom wall, I swear the air thinned, as if something enormous was leaning close, smelling, remembering. Like it knows our scent. Like it never forgot. We saw what we weren't meant to. And every night since, the same steady rhythm has started up again. Approaching from the woods, circling, observing with a patience that feels almost sentient. Not hunting, just waiting, finishing the circle it started. I was 28th of November. I hiked alone into Umpqua National Forest, trying to quiet the noise in my life, my divorce, my insomnia, the feeling that I'd forgotten who I was before everything fell apart. The air tasted like metal that morning, sharp and cold, and the trees leaned over the trail as if they were studying me, deciding whether to let me pass. I told myself that was just the exhaustion, talking, the kind that crawls behind your eyes after too many sleepless nights, spent rehearsing old arguments with someone who wasn't there to hear them anymore. I'd chosen this part of the forest because no one else seemed to. The ranger at the desk even raised an eyebrow when I put in my solo permit. "Quiet spot," she said. "Most people avoid that side of the Cedar Flats. Gets foggy, hard to track time." I'd laughed, a brittle sound. That's the idea. By afternoon, the trail narrowed, swallowed by wet ferns and rotting logs. Fog drifted low across the timberline, moving in slow currents like breath from something enormous and sleeping. I tried to ignore the way it muffled the sound of my footsteps and turned the entire forest into a blurred watercolor of green and gray. Then, I saw it. A decaying cedar, trunk leaning like a tired shoulder. Wedged into its side was an old tree stand. The boards gray, bowed, and half-rotted. It creaked softly in the wind as if someone still sat up there, shifting their weight to get a better look at me. The smell of old sap hung thick around it, earthy and strangely warm compared to the air. Below it, scattered across moss and pine needles, lay a rusted canteen, a torn camo jacket, and a faded tag. MT 2003. I crouched to look. The jacket sleeve pointed toward the deeper woods, oddly deliberate, the way someone's arm might fall if they'd tried to crawl away. I told myself it was coincidence, wind, decay, but my chest tightened, and my breath felt too loud in the quiet. I should have walked on. Instead, I took a photo of the tag. I told myself it was nothing, just trash from an old hunter, but the forest around me paused, like something had stopped breathing the moment I touched the jacket. I set camp half a mile away. The fog thickened until the trees became vague, towering shadows shifting in and out of view. The ground beneath my tent felt colder than the rest of the clearing, as though something below the soil was leaching warmth straight through the earth. I wasn't asleep when it happened. A whisper slid across the nylon of my tent, thin and wet, and close enough to stir the hairs at the base of my skull. "Heather." I froze, eyes wide in the darkness. The whisper moved, no footsteps, no brush of leaves, just a slow orbit around the tent, dragging the soft fabric inward with each pass. I held my breath so long my chest ached. Again, closer. "Heather." My heart beat so violently, I felt it in my teeth. Then the voice changed. Just a shift in tone at first, deeper, then lighter, then frayed. It slipped into a voice I knew too well. My ex-husband, Matt's. Soft, apologetic. "Heather, please, talk to me." "No," I whispered to myself, shaking. "No, no, no." The voice shifted again, my mother's now, calling me in from the yard when I was small. A sound I'd almost forgotten. "Come home, Heather." But beneath every imitation was another voice, thin, exhausted, stretched to the point of tearing. Like someone whose throat had been whispering for 20 years straight. Around 3 a.m., the whisper leaned right beside my head and breathed, "Heather, you heard me." The tent wall dipped inward, as if something pressed its face gently against the fabric. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, until a pale band of light finally crept into the trees. When sunrise reached the clearing, the air smelled like damp cedar and cold metal. My legs shook as I packed. I nearly tripped twice on the trail, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The forest felt awake, now, alert, listening. The ranger station wasn't far, but each minute stretched like an hour. When I finally staggered through the door, Ranger Jess looked up from her paperwork, startled. "Whoa, you okay?" I held out my phone with trembling fingers. "I found something, and something found me." She clicked through the photos before going absolutely still. "M.T.," she murmured. "Mark Thompson. Went missing up there in 03. Never found a trace." She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have camped alone." I didn't argue. When she offered to come with me so authorities could check the site, I agreed instantly. But when we returned, nothing was the same. The tree stand still clung to the cedar, but the air around it felt different, charged, almost expectant. Jess crouched beside the gear. "You said this jacket was dry?" "It was," I whispered. "It was stiff with age." She lifted the sleeve. Water ran off the fabric and pooled on the moss. "This valley didn't get rain yesterday," she muttered. Then she picked up the canteen. The cap, fused with rust the day before, now twisted open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, water gleamed clear, cold, fresh enough that condensation beaded across the exterior, as if it had been pulled from a mountain stream seconds ago. Jess set it down like it had burned her. "That's impossible." But the forest around us held stillness so absolute it felt like it was waiting for something to happen next. Waiting for me, specifically. A tremor moved through the cedar. Not wind, something deeper, like a shiver moving through bone. Jess stepped back. "We're done. Authorities can handle the rest. You need to go home, Heather." I nodded, but as we walked away, I felt eyes on my back. The feeling didn't leave on the drive out of Umpqua. It didn't leave when I reached my apartment, dropped my pack, and collapsed onto my couch. My phone buzzed with unread messages from friends, from work, from a world that felt 1,000 miles away. I tried to sleep that night. I tried. But as soon as the lights were off, the room filled with the same pressed-in quiet I'd felt inside the forest. Then the whisper returned, not from outside, not from the hallway, from the space beside my bed. "Heather." I bolted upright, breath strangled in my throat. The room was dim, the faint glow from the street lamp slicing across the floor. Nothing moved. But the air smelled faintly of cedar cold, damp, impossible. I turned on every light in the apartment, slept with them on. Still, the whisper threaded itself through the electric hum, sliding behind my thoughts. The next morning my voice cracked when I called Jess. "I hear it," I said. It followed me. She was quiet a long time before she replied. "Voices after a traumatic event aren't uncommon. Your mind might be. It knows my name," I snapped. "It knew things it shouldn't." More silence, then softly, "Heather, don't go back there." The days became warped after that. Time stretched strangely. The whisper didn't speak constantly, only when I was tired, or alone, or drifting toward sleep. And every time it came, it used a different voice. My childhood best friend, an uncle who died when I was 15. Matt again, always Matt, whispering apologies that felt like warm hands tightening around my throat. But beneath every familiar tone was the same frayed undercurrent, the same exhausted thread of a voice that had pressed against my tent. The same voice that told me I'd heard it once before. One night, when exhaustion pinned me to the mattress, I whispered into the dark, "What do you want?" The answer slid against my ear so close I felt the air move. To be remembered. A cold wave rolled through me. My chest seized. "Mark?" I managed, but the whisper shifted again, older now, rasping, layered, as if more than one voice spoke at once. Others, many others. I thought about the jacket sleeve pointing toward the woods, toward something deeper, something more than one missing man. I thought about the canteen refilling itself with icy water. I thought about the tree stand, that groaned like it carried weight. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls. My world shrank to the radius of my apartment, where light never felt bright enough, and shadows always seemed to stretch farther than they should. The whispers blurred into my thoughts, until I couldn't tell where they ended, and I began. Last night was the worst. I woke at 2:58 a.m., to a pressure against my mattress, like someone had sat down beside me in the dark. The whisper didn't circle this time. It came from the exact spot where the weight pressed the bed downward. "Heather, you heard me once." The mattress dipped deeper. My breath snagged. "You'll hear me again." That's where I am now, lights on, sitting upright, too afraid to blink. The smell of cedar fills the room again, cold and wet and patient. I know it's not just in my head. I know something followed me from that forest. Not a ghost, not a person, but a memory with teeth. And it's whispering again. Waiting. Listening. And I think I'm starting to whisper back. I was 34 the spring morning. I walked deeper into a Deschutes National Forest than I normally dared, hoping to spot a tom turkey before the weather turned. But even as my boots touched the damp needles, something inside me whispered that I shouldn't be out there alone. My name is Aaron Foster, and I've hunted these woods since I was a teenager. I know their moods when they're calm, when they're hiding something, when they're about to turn on you. But that morning the forest felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. The air carried this metallic bite, almost like the sharp tingle you get when you smell blood. The pine's long shadows shivered across the ground, thin and restless. Even the wind held back, as if listening. I told myself I was imagining it, that grief could do strange things because it was the first spring since Mom passed. Getting out there was supposed to clear my mind, settle me. Instead, every instinct coiled tight. My fingers kept brushing the knife on my hip, not out of habit but reassurance. About a mile past Walton Lake, the silence thickened. No birds, no squirrels, not even a mosquito whining in my ear. I slowed, one hand gripping the strap of my pack, the other brushing cold bark as I followed a faint game trail down a ridge. That's when I saw the first circle. 12 dead birds, arranged in a perfect ring, feathers stiff, beaks pointed outward with eerie precision. And, in the center, a single, smooth stone painted a glossy, deliberate red. I froze. My breath fogged in front of me, too loud in the sudden stillness. I whispered to myself, "Who the hell does this?" But the sound of my own voice startled me so badly I flinched. I backed away, thinking it had to be some twisted prank, but 20 minutes later, near a patch of old-growth fir, I saw the second ring, then a third. Each one impossibly perfect, no drag marks, no disturbed pine needles, no tools, no footprints. Whoever did this knew how to move like a ghost. The forest smell changed with every circle. Stronger rot, sweeter decay, almost syrupy. The kind of sweetness that makes your throat tighten. I told myself to turn around, to go home, to pretend this was just a weird fluke. But then I spotted it, a leather-bound journal tucked beneath a fallen log. It looked like it had been placed there, not dropped, dry despite the morning frost. The corners softened with age. My chest tightened. "Leave it, Aaron, just leave it." But I didn't. Curiosity is a kind of gravity. I knelt, brushing away needles, and lifted it. The leather was warm, too warm, like someone had held it recently. The journal opened easily, the spine already broken in. The handwriting inside was small, neat, almost tender. Observation 19. Red-winged blackbirds. Method, cyanide dusting. Latency, 9 minutes. Arrangement complete. Meaning emerges through pattern. Nature resists, but I am patient. I felt my stomach lurch. My mouth went dry. Every page held more entries, poison trials, trap mechanisms, crude vivisection diagrams. Years of experimentation, sketched with an unsettling mix of scientific calm and something close to reverence. The tone was almost loving. Then I turned to a recent entry, dated just 2 days earlier. Phase 2 begins. Mammals. Larger subjects require more space. I snapped. The journal shut instinctively. That's when I noticed the clearing. 30 yards away, a bare circle of earth raked smooth, free of leaves or needles. Too smooth, too deliberate, an empty arena, waiting. And in the dirt along its edge, footprints. Big ones. Leading away in the direction I'd walked from. A watchful path. A following path. My pulse thundered in my ears. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I shoved the journal into my pack and hiked fast, too fast for safe footing, but fear trumped safety. Every snapped twig behind me sounded like a deliberate step. Every shift of wind felt like breath on my neck. By the time the forest thinned and my truck came into view, my shirt was stuck to my back with cold sweat. The woods behind me seemed to tighten like a fist. But even after I locked myself inside, even after I heard the engine rumble to life, I felt watched, observed, chosen. I drove straight to the wildlife office in Prineville and shoved the journal toward the first person who'd listen. They questioned me for hours. What trail? What time? What distances? What did I touch? Did I see anyone? Their calmness felt off, too practiced. When they finally released me, it was dark. My headlights cut across the empty road, and the forest loomed black on either side like it was swallowing its secrets again. I thought the worst was over. But that night, when I got home and stepped onto my porch, something crunched under my boot. A stone. Smooth. Round. Painted the same glossy red. I didn't pick it up at first. I was too busy staring into the street, as if whoever left it might still be there, some silhouette waiting behind the neighbor's truck or hiding in the shadow of the oak tree. Nothing moved. No breeze. No sound. I whispered, "No, no, no, no." But the stone just sat there, patient, placed. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. I stepped inside, shut it, locked it again, then slid the chain across. For a moment I leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing hard through my nose, hoping the trembling in my legs would stop. It didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every noise made me bolt upright, the heater clicking on, the house settling, a car passing 2 streets over. I sat by the living room window with the lights off, watching my own yard like it might shift shape when I blinked. The stone stayed on the porch until dawn. When the first soft light crept over my street, I finally forced myself out to grab it. It was heavier than it looked. Warm again. That warmth terrified me more than anything in the forest. Over the next few days, paranoia seeped into everything. I kept checking the locks, checking the windows, checking the backyard. I started brushing my teeth with the bathroom door open, just to see the hallway mirror. I stopped hiking, stopped going out at night, stopped answering unknown numbers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those circles, that journal, that clearing, smooth, perfect, waiting for something larger, waiting for me. By the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove out to the wildlife office again, demanding updates. The ranger at the front desk looked at me with that tight, polite smile you give someone you don't want to upset. "There's nothing yet," she said. "We're still processing the evidence." "The journal?" I asked. "Cataloged. And the circles?" Her jaw tightened. "We didn't find them." My throat went dry. "What do you mean you didn't find them?" I marked the damn GPS point. "We searched thoroughly," she interrupted softly. "No bird remains, no circles, no clearing like you described. The area looked undisturbed." "That's impossible," I whispered. She didn't contradict me. She just looked tired. I left, shaking. That night, I noticed something new. Scratches. Thin, deliberate, evenly spaced scratches along the siding near my back door. At first, I thought they were animal marks, maybe raccoons. But they were too precise, too measured. Like Someone had dragged a knife gently across the siding, in a perfect arc. A circle. My breath hitched. A small sound escaped me, half sob, half gasp. I called my friend Mariah, the only person I trusted enough to tell. When she arrived, she hugged me like she thought I might break. "Aaron, this is God. You should call the sheriff." "I did," I said. "They filed a report. That's it." She paced, hands on her hips. "What do you want me to do?" Quote, "Stay," I whispered. "Just for tonight." She slept on the couch. I slept, if you could call it sleep, sitting up in a chair with a flashlight in my lap. Around 3 a soft, rhythmic tapping woke me. I froze. Tap, tap. Not the front door. Not the back. The window. Mariah whispered from the couch. "Aaron, did you hear that?" The tapping continued slow, patient, like someone tracing a fingertip against the glass. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My eyes locked on the window, and I swear just for a second I saw a shape. A shadow blocking out the faint glow of the streetlight. Broad shoulders. Still. Watching. Mariah grabbed my arm. "Call someone. Now." By the time I found my phone, the shadow was gone. The next morning, Mariah insisted we check the outside. On the windowsill, beneath where the tapping had been, lay another stone. Smooth. Red. Waiting. I felt my knees weaken. Mariah caught my arm. "Aaron, you're not safe here." "I know," I whispered. I moved out of my house that week, sold it to a couple from Eugene who had no idea why the ask price dropped so suddenly. I relocated to Bend, telling myself distance would make the fear fade. But fear isn't a place. It's a tether. 2 months later, I found a third stone outside my new apartment door. Then, a fourth, on my car seat. Then the fifth appeared on my kitchen counter, inside, not outside. I never heard a door open, never heard a window break, never set the stone there myself. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I smell that forest rot again, sweet, metallic, clinging to the back of my tongue. Sometimes I hear tapping on my window. And sometimes, when I walk into my living room at night, I feel watched, studied, chosen. I don't know when phase 2 will reach me. But every time I close my eyes, some distant part of me imagines a circle being drawn silent, perfect, inevitable, large enough for something that walks on 2 legs, large enough for me. The forest felt older there, like the rain had been falling on that spot for 40 straight years, and I was stupid enough to walk straight into its memory. I didn't say that part out loud, of course. I was supposed to be keeping my head clear, tracking the deer sign my dad had always sworn would straighten me out. Instead, I kept replaying this stupid argument with my sister from that morning, hearing her voice echo behind every gust of cold November wind. "You isolate when you're hurting. Ellie, you disappear." Maybe she was right. Maybe that was why I'd driven alone into the Oregon Coast Range with nothing but a backpack, a thermos of burnt coffee, and the hope that walking far enough would drown out everything I didn't know how to fix. But the deeper I went, the stranger the woods felt. The air smelled thick, with wet cedar and old metal. Mist threaded between the branches like smoke. My boots sank into mud that seemed too dark, too soft, like it had been turned over recently, even though nothing around here looked touched. I followed a narrow creek bed, my breath fogging in front of me, when something caught on a boulder up ahead, a flash of pale blue against the gray. I stepped closer and felt the first real drop inside my stomach. A denim jacket, shredded, sun-bleached. The collar crumbled when I touched it, the fabric brittle as dead leaves. It didn't look like it had been dropped. It looked like it had been left deliberately, carefully, like someone meant for it to be found. I told myself it was just old. Hunters lose things all the time. But then, 10 yards downstream, I saw the boot, half buried in gravel, the leather puckered from decades of rain. then a rusted hunting knife, then the wallet. I felt it under my boot before I saw it, a soft give beneath the mud. I knelt, scraping dirt away with my fingers, and pulled it free. The leather peeled like rotten bark. Inside, a driver's license slumped forward, edges warped. Rebecca Ann Hartley. DOP, the 12th of April 1962. Missing since May 1983. I froze. I knew the name. Everyone in Tillamook County did. She'd vanished on a solo hike. Her story passed around like a cautionary tale when I was a kid. Don't wander too far. Don't go off trail. Don't end up like Rebecca. The photo on the license. Rebecca with feathered hair and soft brown eyes looked unsettlingly intact compared to everything else. Like it had waited. Like it had been sheltered. A cold ripple moved across my skin. Okay, I whispered to nobody. Okay, Ellie, don't freak yourself out. But the air around me had changed. Thicker, charged, like the forest had sucked in a breath but refused to let it go. I turned, and that was when I saw her. She stood across the creek in the tree line, about 20 yards away. A woman in old jeans and a sage-colored windbreaker, hair damp and clinging to her cheeks. Her posture was wrong, too still, too deliberate. Her face carried no expression at first, but her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made the blood thrum in my ears. I wanted to call out to her, ask if she was lost, if she was hurt, but something inside me screamed not to. Her mouth twitched. Not a smile, not a grimace. Something like recognition. Slowly, she lifted her arm and pointed behind me. My throat closed. I spun. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just mist drifting over the creek like low smoke. When I turned back, she was gone. No footsteps, no branches snapping, no brush shifting, just absence clean and wrong. I backed up until my shoulders hit a tree. My breathing had gone thin and fast. I snapped photos, lots of them, my hands shaking so hard the images blurred. Jacket, boot, knife, wallet, the ground where she had stood. Get out now. I didn't run, but I didn't walk either. I half stumbled up the creek bed, slipping on wet stones, every nerve screaming that someone was following me. At the trailhead, I practically fell into my truck, slamming the locks without thinking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling long enough to turn the key. I drove straight to the Tillamook Sheriff's office, rehearsing the story in my head, trying to make it sound sane. When the deputy looked at the license, he went pale. We had her case file on my first week. He murmured, 25 years, unsolved. I showed them the photos. None of them laughed. None of them questioned me. They organized a search party for the morning. I agreed to guide them back. But that night, in the motel room they put me in just to keep me close. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face again, not the photo. The apparition. The way she'd pointed behind me, as if trying to say, "You're not alone." And the worst part? I kept feeling like I had missed something. Or worse, like something had followed me out. I met the search party at dawn, 3 deputies and a volunteer named Mark who smiled too wide for someone standing in sleet. Nobody asked how I slept. Nobody had to. I looked like hell. My reflection in the truck window showed dark crescents under my eyes. My braid frayed from running my fingers through it all night. We started up the trail in silence. The forest felt different in daylight, not safer, just exposed. Like whatever I had seen, preferred the dark, and had simply stepped back for now. The deeper we moved, the more wrong everything felt. The trees leaned inward as if listening. The creek sounded thicker, slower. My chest tightened with every step. Just ahead, I said, voice cracking. The jacket was right there on that boulder. But the boulder was bare. The boot, gone. The knife, gone. The wallet, gone from the ground, but I still had it in an evidence bag. Deputy Shaw frowned, scanning the area. "Are you positive this is the exact spot?" "Yes." I said too fast. "I mean, yes. I remember the bend in the creek, the little overhang of roots. It was all right here." Mark crouched, brushing his hand along the rocks. Maybe someone came through last night? No one knew about it, I said. Except me and you guys. The deputies kept searching, but I already knew. The forest had taken everything back. Everything, except... Hold up, Shaw muttered. He knelt and lifted a small stone with 2 fingers. Beneath it was a warped, water-stained Polaroid. My stomach dropped. Is this yours? He asked. I shook my head. My voice wouldn't work. He passed it to me. The photo was faded, nearly white around the edges, but the center showed a figure, blurry, distant, standing in the exact spot where I had seen the woman. Not modern clothing, not modern posture. I flipped it over. The 6th of May, 2083. Scribbled in pen. My vision tunneled. I had to sit before my knees buckled. Shaw crouched in front of me, lowering his voice. Ellie, how did you know where to find all this? I told you, I whispered. I saw her. Mark exhaled sharply. Saw who? Rebecca. She pointed behind me. She was trying to tell me something. They exchanged looks, polite concern blended with suspicion, but I didn't care. The truth didn't need them to believe it. The search ended early. Snow was coming in fast. They insisted on walking me back, but every step away from the creek felt like peeling something off my skin. Like I was being unthreaded from a place I had accidentally become part of. That night back home, my sister called. You sound weird, she said. Did something happen? I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was wired. Watching the tree line beyond my apartment windows as fog thickened along the parking lot, every gust of wind made my heart stutter. At 2 a.m., I woke to a soft tapping on the glass. Not knocking, not branches. Tapping, deliberate, human. I sat up, breath hitching. The curtains glowed faintly from the street lamp. A silhouette stood just outside the reach of the light, motionless, thin, slightly hunched, watching. My skin iced over. I forced myself out of bed and stepped closer. My hand lifted the curtain by an inch. A woman stood just beyond the tree line, mist swirling around her legs. Her hair hung damp and dark, just like before. Her clothes were wrong for the year, faded jeans, sage windbreaker. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Slowly, agonizingly slow, she raised her hand again. Pointed. Directly. Behind me. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back, she was gone. Just fog pressing against the glass like breath. I crawled back into bed but didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow trembled in my peripheral vision. The Polaroid lay on my nightstand, the timestamp staring at me. The 6th of May, 2083. The day she vanished. The daytime slipped open. The day something saw me looking. I still hike, but never alone. Never near the coast range. And when fog creeps close, thick and heavy, I feel her before I see her, like a draft through a door that should be shut. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it walks. Sometimes it follows. And sometimes on the nights when the mist presses tight against my windows, I swear she's there again. Her outline, faint but unmistakable, raising her hand, the same way she did in the woods, pointing behind me. Trying to finish the message, she didn't get to speak.